Recording is set. Nice. All right. Well. Welcome to lesson two of creating the can, lesson three in general. Let me start by sharing my screen. It's probably a good thing. Let's see. Right.
Hello, Bailey.
Bailey, welcome. All right. Can someone confirm if the stream's working?
Yes, sir. Works fine.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Thanks. Okay. So I think in the past week we also got a new update from Blender to 3.4. I don't think a lot has changed. Primarily with the grease pencil, which is something could use for 2D animation in Blender. Next to that, I haven't seen anything that interesting yet, but I will be diving more deep into Blender 3.4 and let you guys know if anything interesting changed. Right, this is where we left off the last time with the base model of our can, the nice looking cylinder. And today we're gonna be working on some of those details, and they may look small, but they are quite interesting to make. Especially because we also have this Red Bull icon, and you can of course use your own icon, whatever you want your can to be. Use the related icon as well, and we're gonna be using some curves as well to create this small little um, what is it called? I don't know. The like the ridge. So I'll be working on that for sure. Right. So when you're modeling, you're not required to directly create the second object on top of the first one. We can just create it wherever we want and then move it over to our can whenever we want as well. So when I'm working with a reference image, I like to have them both in view, the reference image and the object that I'm going to be working on. So I don't think I've shared this yet, but to get into a side view of a front view, you can use your numpad keys. Now, some of you will be working with laptops without numpad keys, in which case it's a little bit more tricky. But you can hold your Alt key and then hold middle mouse button, and if you then drag your mouse to the left or right, you will get into different perspective modes depending on what side you're dragging with your middle mouse button, right? So if you don't have your numpad, you can use that, and you can also use the little the axis preview on the top right. For example, if I click on the Z on top, it will take me to the top view. X will take me to the front view. Y will take me to the side view. You can use that as well. So numpad is not required yet. Now, Beppel already mentioned this. We should always save our files. So if we mess anything up, you still have it. So you can either just press Ctrl S to save. That's what I usually press. I press it a lot. You will see some random Ctrl S shortcuts during this tutorial as well, because it's something that I just learned. Just Ctrl S your file every now and then. Right, let's get starting to modeling this. And if I want to add an object right there so I can start modeling this little cap, I can just move my 3D cursor there first. And that's this little icon, the cursor on the top left. There's a shortcut for that as well. It is Shift Space. You can select your cursor from that little menu and then just select it and then just move it with your mouse to where you want. I'm just gonna pop it right there. It doesn't have to be too precise. And this basically means that the objects that we add now will appear at the cursor, right? So if you now add, for example, a new plane, Shift A, Mesh Plane, we get a plane. You can see it because we are at the same view of the plane, and the plane has 0 thickness, so we can't see it right now. If we rotate our screen a little bit, it will appear, of course. So I want to rotate this 90 degrees around the y-axis first. So I'm going to press R and Y and 90. Now it disappears again because it is behind or clipped into this reference image. I'm just going to move that out with the G and X. Right. Now, scale this down a little bit by pressing S. And we're just going to be making the outline of this object first. We're going to be worrying about all of the details on the inside later. And I'm just going to move this to the side just a little bit so I can see what I'm creating. And now we have to go to edit mode. And you can do that by pressing tab, of course. So tab brings us to edit mode, and then we can press 2 to go to edge select. So now we can select any edge we want and move it around with G, or rotate it around with R, whatever you want. So I'm going to be trying to recreate this shape. And to do so, we have to think about what we want to make as well. So we want to add this Red Bull logo later, and this little indent as well. It's like a square, and in the square there is a circle. So we are going to create that as well, and we have to create this little ellipse as well. Right, so there are multiple ways to do that. Of course, there are multiple ways. It's Blender. There are a lot of ways to achieve the same result. I'm just gonna be making it with the way that I would approach this anytime as well. So first things first, I'm gonna add a new modifier. And we've already been using this for the can as well. And it's gonna be a subdivision surface. And I'm gonna set that at like 2 for now. And it is just because we have some smooth corners and a lot of smooth and rounded shapes. It is nice to start off with a subdivision modifier. So that's what we're doing. Right, so I'm gonna be making this top part first. So it has to be like a little bit of a more stretched square. So I'm gonna move this part up a little bit. So press G and Z, just like that. And then for the bottom part, we want a different section. So I'm going to press E and Z and extrude that down on the Z axis a little bit. So now we have two shapes. And there's some kind of rounding right there as well. Something like the shape goes inwards a little bit. We can make that too by adding an edge loop. We've already done that as well. So press Ctrl R to add that, left click, and then swipe it to where you want it. And I want it to be just below that top line. So right about there. And the bottom part is a little bit less broad, so a little bit thinner than the top part. So I'm just going to select those two edges right here. And I'm going to press S and X. Nope, it's Y. And you can just change your axis while you have it locked. So I can go from Y to X just like that, to Z as well. You can just change your axis by pressing the related button. So I'm going to press Y and then just scale this down just a little bit like that. And we have to make this top part a little bit more squared. So I'm going to press Ctrl R and hover my mouse over this right edge or left, doesn't matter. And left click and just swipe that up until we got that same kind of rounding on that corner, like so. And now we can start worrying about the rest of this object. And we are going to be worrying about this circle first. And the fun thing is that because we are using a subdivision modifier already, it is quite easy to make a spherical shape, an elliptical shape, because anything that is squared with a subdivision modifier will become rounded. So if we, for example, have this face right there, face select is 3 on your keyboard, remember that. And for example, if we press I now to inset this face a little bit, just like that, it is still a square. But the moment I extrude this, so press E, it will become rounded because of this subdivision modifier, right? So it's gonna be trying to smoothen out your geometry a little bit, and any square will now become more rounded. And if you have 4 corners, every corner will get rounded and you end up with an ellipse. So that is perfect. That's exactly what we need in the top right there. But you can see that it is quite small. We need it to be more to the top. So I'm going to press Ctrl Z a few times because this was just to preview it to you guys. But we want to inset it on a larger part. We want to inset on 2 parts of our mesh. And we can do that. So if we want to inset this face together with this face, we can select the first one, hold shift, select the second one. And now if we press inset, so I, it will inset both of those faces. And the fun thing in Blender is we can switch this up. So if we have I selected one time, it will inset both faces together. And if I press I again now, it will inset each face individually, right? So you can see how pressing I changes the inset mode. Right now we want them combined. So I'm just gonna combine them just like that. And that is looking nice. Now, before we're gonna be extruding this part only, we have to add some thickness to this little cap. So I'm gonna press A to select everything. And then I'm just going to be pressing E to extrude this and just select a thickness that you like. Something like this looks fine for the lid. And now we can select this face and this face by holding Shift. And now we can just press E to extrude this. And now we don't have our ellipse anymore, right? And the reason why is because we have an edge loop right here, and that just messes it up. So if we dissolve this, right mouse, dissolve edge, you see that we get that ellipse back, but now we've got those corners gone, and that's not what we want. So what we can do is dissolve that edge like we just did. So dissolving an edge means you are just removing it from your geometry. So right mouse, after you double click, dissolve edge. And now we just need those outer corners to be more squared. And we can do that by just adding a bevel. And a bevel is added with Ctrl B. So Ctrl B and swipe that out. You'll see we get a more cornered geometry without affecting the circle on the inside, right? And scrolling up and down will define how many edge loops you're adding. I think one is actually enough right now. And remember that the more geometry you add in your object, the harder it's going to be for your computer. So try to keep it as low as possible with those edge loops as well. So if one does the trick, just keep it at one. There's no reason to add more. Right, left click to apply. Beautiful. Now we have some roundings that we have to get rid of. So we've got this rounding right here. I want a hard edge because you can see this edge is quite hard as well. And we can do that with more edge loops. Okay, so we can't see that edge. We can't see that face right there. How can we show it? Well, I usually just go to X-ray mode. It's the little square on square button on the top right, left click. And now you can see those faces better. Okay, so disable, you can see you've got that ellipse. Enable, you can see you've got your geometry before you're going to be applying that subdivision modifier, because we can still see that squared geometry now that we can't see in the regular view. So enable that, and we just need two edge loops, one right here. So press Ctrl R, left click, and just swipe that down a little bit, and left click. And you can always show it, so show the results by left clicking again on the X-ray. You can see that we already have a nice hard edge right there. All right, so remember, subdivision mode, hard edges are made with more edge loops or beveling. So press tab, right mouse, shade smooth, and that's looking nice already. And of course, we still got those cornered faces, something that can very easily be fixed by adding another level of subdivision. So just swipe that to 3 instead of 2. Make sure to match your viewport with the render. Otherwise, when you're going to be rendering this product out now, you will have 2 subdivisions, which will make your render look like that. So if there's a mismatch in your viewport, so this is the viewport right now. If there's a mismatch in the viewport and the render in terms of smoothness of your geometry, it is more often than not an issue of having different levels of subdivision in your geometry, so in that modifier. So make sure that you keep them the same, or at least remember that you don't have them the same. All right, so this is looking nice already. Right now, we are gonna be focusing on adding this square right there. And that's gonna be a little bit more tricky, and I wanna show how to do that in a different way, quite an easy way. And this is with a new modifier. And it's gonna be a different one that we've been using so far. So it's gonna be some new information. So what we want to do is look at this object in terms of removing shapes. So we have this shape. How do we get to this shape? Well, we need to remove some geometry. And more specifically, we need to remove geometry in the shape of a cube, because this is a cube shape. So what we need to do is take this geometry and remove a cube. So if we add a modifier and we go to Boolean, and Boolean is pretty much an operation that you can use to combine shapes with or remove shapes from other shapes. Or you can, let's see, you've got the Boolean, you've got 3 options, intersect. And let me show you what all of those options do, so you have an understanding of this modifier. So if I'm going to add a new object, Shift A, Mesh Cube, and scale that down by a lot. And let's have it intersect with our mesh by pressing G and moving it around. So it intersects nicely now. And I'm just gonna move it wherever. Now, if we select that first object and we go to the Boolean modifier, and if we set it on difference, and difference is the default setting, it is always starting on difference, and the operation type is going to be object. If you select the object, so in this case the cube, and you can do that with the eyedropper icon, which is the way that I usually use. It's quite easy. You just left click on that eyedropper and you can basically select the object from your viewport, right? So if you hover over it, it will show the name. So we want the cube, left click. And you can already see the outline of this object change with the cube removed, right? So that's what difference means. You remove the selected object from your selected object. Or sorry, you remove the object that you want. So the cube in this case, you remove it from the selected object. And if you do union, you will unify those objects. So right now we've got this little lid combined with a cube. If I set this on intersect, you will only get that part that intersects with the cube. So if I hide this cube, you will see that we only get the part that is intersected with that cube, right? So in this case, what do we want? We want to remove geometry, so we want the difference. But we don't want it over there. We want it on a specific part of our mesh. And you can see that if I move this cube around now with G and Y, for example, you can see that the geometry gets removed right away. So let's scale this down and let's move this up a little bit. So we are about at the same location as it is in the lid in the preview image. And let's scale this up a little bit as well. And it doesn't have to be too precise. Something like that. And you can see that it doesn't cut entirely through that lid. So we have to go to the side view. So just rotate your screen. And for me, it currently goes through. But if we do press, if you press G and lock it to X, we can just move that. So it is ending inside of our mesh. Something like that. You can always see that orange outline around your cube, and you can always see where it is located at, even if it's behind the mesh. So something like that should be nice. I'm gonna be trying to move it to about the middle there. And now we can just hide our cube. So if you press H on your keyboard with an object selected, it will hide that object. And that is it. We've got that nice different feel now. We still have a weird shading issue. And that is what you usually get with a Boolean modifier. The shading gets weird because after you separate the geometry from its object, so after you delete it, you will have a different geometry. So if I apply this, and you don't have to do this, if I apply this subdivision modifier, you can see that it's quite a nice geometry. But if I show this and apply that, we can see that we've got quite a weird geometry right there. It cuts through and it leaves us with weird geometry. So that's why the shading gets messed up. But don't worry, it's not a big deal because we can just change the shading type. So if you press right mouse on our object, the default is set on shade flat, so like this. We usually do shade smooth, but if you get weird artifacts like this, you can right click shade out of smooth, and it will most of the times be fixed. Right? And the reason why I don't just apply this modifier is because I want to be able to change this, right? So if you have a huge scene with multiple objects and you set all of their subdivisions to a high amount and apply them, you will have a lot of geometry in your scene and it will get really slow. And if we have this modifier still in the scene, we can just set those viewports lower and keep those render settings high, right? So it doesn't matter that we are that it shows corners right now, as long as we have it set to 3 in the render. So now that if I render this out, we will be seeing the subdivision on level 3. So like that, right? So that's why I don't apply that modifier. All right, so we've got that cube pretty much split out of our object, and we can still change the shape of that cube. So by hiding and unhiding, you can see I'm using the eye icon right now on the top right. That's also used to hide your object. when you have your object hidden, sometimes you can't really find it again because it's hidden. So you have to find it in your tree at that point in your object tree, and just look for the object that is missing an eye, right? So we can just enable and disable that. And you can also press Alt H in your viewport. So if I hide this and press Alt H, it will unhide that object as well, but it will unhide all objects in your scene, right? So if I hide this and hide this as well, and press Alt H, it will automatically unhide everything. All right, so if you ever lose an item by pressing H by accident, just press Alt H. Right, so I want to give a little bit of a bevel to this cube. So select it, press tab, and select the corners of the cube that you want to bevel. So press 2 to go to edge select mode, and select that edges that you want to bevel a little bit. So I want this and this as well. And I actually want the entire back face as well, because that's how we can create a nice looking rounding in that Boolean modifier, right? So if I go to X-ray mode, we can now start selecting that entire back edge loop as well. And I can just press Ctrl B and add a nice bevel. And now it's quite sharp, but remember we can scroll this up to add another edge loop, like so. Left click, press tab, and let's go out of X-ray mode. Now, one thing that you should know about Booleans is that it will take the shading of the object that you are using as a Boolean, right? So this object is set at shade flat, so we can see those flat shades right there. You don't see a smooth shape. And if I now look at this object and hide this one, you can see that we can get that same flat shading that we had on our cube, right? Even though this object is set on shade smooth. So remember that if you want that Boolean part to be shaded smooth as well, you will need to shade the Boolean object smooth as well. So if we shade this smooth, and let's see, shade smooth, there we go. And if I now hide this, we can see that we now have a smoothened out corner shadow as well. All right, that's looking fine. We can now take a look at yet another Boolean. And this time we're going to be doing it a little bit faster because you now know how to do Booleans. Right, select your object, and we want that circle in the middle, and we want it to be right in the middle of this cube. So what I'm going to do is just unhide that cube for a second, select it, press tab, and I'm going to press 3 to go into face select, and I'm going to select this front face. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I now have the face selected that I want the circle to be in the center of. So I'm going to be selecting this face, and I'm going to press Shift S, and I'm going to do the cursor to select it, and then just release it. And left click, and there we go. The cursor is now in the center of this face, which means that if we now add a new circle object, it will appear at the center of this cursor, which will be the center of this face now. Beautiful. So go into object mode, hide your cube, we don't need it anymore. Press Shift A, mesh, and let's add that circle right now. And it is quite big now if you zoom out. Let's scale that down, press S, and just scale that down to about the size that you need. Something like that will do the trick. Now, obviously, we need to rotate it. So press R and Y and 90. And let's just go to tab, so edit mode, and press F to fill this up real quick. And just extrude that all the way through your object, right? Because this hole is completely through our lid. So press tab, left click on your little lid, and let's add another Boolean, right? Boolean, we need it on difference because we need to remove geometry, and use the eyedropper once again to select that circle that we just made. All right, now remember we need to select that cylinder, right mouse, and shade smooth, or shade auto smooth. We can do auto smooth for this one. And then we can just press H to hide that, and now it is not working. And there's usually a reason for that. Booleans are always a little bit funny. Just unhide that and left click on your lid right away. And we can change the solver type from exact to fast, and that usually does the trick. And you can see it fixes this right now as well. And this is just something that you have to keep in mind. If exact doesn't do the trick, then usually the other option will, and the other way around as well. And if that doesn't work, you can always try to change some of this solver option, so the overlap threshold. If you change that, it will most of the time change the outcome as well. But fast usually does the trick, and it's faster as well. So if you have a very detailed object or a very hard boolean, set this at fast before you do the boolean, so before you select that object, and it will just reduce the time a little bit. All right, so we can select our cylinder and hide it. And there's absolutely no reason at all that I used a circle instead of adding a cylinder. I am just so used at using circles for everything that I even use it to create a cylinder. So I recommend you guys just use a cylinder for this. But you can use both, of course, why not? And now we need this little Red Bull icon. And that's gonna be the most tricky part. And I don't use that a lot myself as well. But if you want to add some kind of shape or icon or whatever to Blender that already exists, you need a vector format. And a vector format is something that you can scale up and down infinitely, and it is just a beautiful format. But usually the things that you download from Google will be PNG or JPEG, so it will be a plain image, so you won't be able to use that as easily. I think there will be some programs on Google that you can search for to just turn easy shapes into vectors, so into SVGs, but they don't work that well most of the time. So I use Photoshop for that, and I hate to say that because it's a paid program, but I use Photoshop to create vectors. So if any of you guys want to create your custom cans with a custom icon, just send the icon over to me and I will turn it to a vector in Photoshop. So that is the only negative part about that. It is, you do need an SVG, so a vector file, right? For this tutorial, I will send that vector file over to the Blender chat later, to our Discord chat, so you can all download that and at least work with that one. So what you do is go to Edit and go to Preferences, because we first have to enable something, and go to Add-ons. And then we have to look for SVG, and there will be an option called Import Export Scalable Vector Graphics, so SVG, and just check that little box and remember to save your settings, save the preferences, and just close that window. And now you can go to File, Import, SVG. Wait up, I need another one. Yeah, Scalable Vector Graphics. Don't use the SVG as grease pencil, we need this one. Left click it and go to your file. It should be here somewhere. Let's see. Am I just blind? Probably. There it is. Left click it and it will be somewhere in your scene. And just press G and move it around a little bit until you can find it. Where is it? If you can't find it, like I can't right now, try to look at your object tree. You will see the object is imported as a collection. So this is a collection icon, and beneath that will be your curve. And if you left click that, you will be able to see that outliner. And there it is. So we've got our Red Bull icon inserted nicely. And right now, these are all curves. And the way you can see this is by pressing tab and going to edit mode and just select one of those vertices. And you will see now that you've got like these curve handles, right? So if I move this, I can change the way of the curve. Another way to see this is by looking at this icon. If you have a curve, the green icon will be a curve. And if you have an object, for example, a cube, your green icon will be like this little triangle, right? So you've got a triangle for meshes and you've got the curve for curves. It's as easy as that. So how do we use this to cut a hole in this object? And let's see. I think this is probably the last part that we're going to be doing in this tutorial. So I'm gonna be taking this, and we already got our cursor quite nicely, right? So it is at least near our object, so that's fine. So if you now press Shift S, like we did previously, we can, instead of doing cursor to selection, we can do selection to cursor, which will move your selected object to the cursor. So just press that and it will move it closer to your object. It's just an easy way of moving your object. Now our origin of this object is off, right? It's to the side. It's quite weird. Now if you rotate our object, it will rotate around a point that is outside of our object. And if we want to fix that, we can press right mouse, set origin, origin to geometry. And that will basically move the origin of that object to the origin of the geometry, right? So let's scale this down a little bit by pressing S. And let's just move this closer to the object with G. Doesn't have to be perfect yet. Just press G a few times and move it to where you need it. And press R and Z 90, R and Y 90. And let's just scale this down even more. Go to that side view that I showed you at the start. And let's scale it up so it meshes this image a little bit more. I don't even know which icon of Red Bull they used. I'm just going to use this one. And now we need some depth, right? Some thickness. Otherwise, we can't get that that shape out of there if we don't have any geometry. And we can do this with a mesh. You can also do it with a curve, but we need a mesh to create that boolean, right? And right now we have a curve. So to go from a curve to a mesh, and the other way around as well, is very simple. Go to Object, Convert, Mesh. And if you want a curve, you select Curve, obviously. But right now we need a mesh. So left click Mesh, and now you can see that icon just changed to like the triangles, and it's now a mesh. Right, so if you go into tab mode, so edit mode, you can see that our geometry is completely messed up. And that's just what happens if you import icons and stuff as a curve and you make it into a mesh. It will just connect these points randomly in triangles. So you get a lot of points. We can reduce that first so we don't get too much geometry in our actual lid as well. So what we're going to do is use yet another modifier, a different one. So select add modifier. And let's see where it is. It is called Decimate. It should be here somewhere. There it is, Decimate. And it basically means that it's going to try to reduce your geometry a little bit. So it's going to try to take some of your geometry away. And there are different ways to do it. Collapse is the first one. And it will basically collapse some of your edges. And if we enable the wireframe real quick, it is the little button on the top right next to the white sphere. So it's the one with the actual wireframe around it, so the lines. If you select that, you can see your geometry right away, and it's quite messy. And if we change this ratio, it will already start removing some of those shapes, but it will also change the outside of your bool. And I can imagine that you want to get this outside just the way as you imported it. So we're going to be using planar for this, and that just usually works way better for things like this. And the angle limit is set at 5 degrees from the start. I usually set this at the same pretty much all the time, which is 0.04. It's just something that seems to be working fine for me most of the time, so I just set that to 0.04 right away and then see if it needs any tweaking. And there we go, face count is now 7. Click this little arrow button and just apply this. So now the modifier is gone and our geometry is at least a little bit more clean, right? We don't have all these lines, all these edges. So let's go back to solid view. So get that white sphere pressed and go into tab. Press A to select your entire bool. And let's press E on your keyboard to extrude that, and just extrude that through your lid right there. So now we've got our nice bool, nice and thick, going through our lid. And now we have to add another boolean, right? So this is a boolean lesson. So left click on your lid, add modifier boolean, and we can set it to fast right now before we select our object. So remember what I said before. Now select this eyedropper icon and just hover over your bool. So it is called curve now because that's just what it named it when I imported it. Left click it, and you can see that we get that orange outliner that will confirm that the boolean is actually working. Beautiful. All right, so let's hide this bool. Press H, and you can see that we get this nice icon going through our lid now, and that's already matching quite nicely with the lid. All right, so there's one issue that we have right now. If I select this lid and I press G to move it, the booleans will stay in place. And that's annoying, right? We don't want that. So what we're gonna do is do some parenting. And I don't mean raising children. We're just gonna be parenting some objects to other objects so they follow their positions, right? So let's unhide everything. Press Alt H. And there we go. We now have everything visible that we want to stick to this lid. Starting with the cube. It was the first one we did. Hold Shift and select that cylinder. It's the second one we did. Third one is that bool. And lastly, select the object that you want them to parent to. So it's the lid. And now you can press Ctrl P, set parent to object. There we go. And now we can hide those objects once again. So just select them and press H. And now if I move this lid, you can see that those modifiers move with it nicely. And even if we rotate this around, it will all stick together. And that's just beautiful. And the reason why we don't just apply all of this is because sometimes we want to edit some of these objects. For example, if we want to make that cube into more of a rounded cube, we can still do that now. If we applied that modifier, so that's that boolean, we can't change the shape anymore. So that's why I usually try to stick the most to modifiers instead of applying them all. Okay, so now we can move this lid to our can. And the way I'm gonna do is just by selecting our can, pressing tab, and let's select that middle vertex right there. So press 1 on your keyboard to go into vertex select and just select that one. Shift S, and let's make the cursor go to the selected. So cursor to selected. There we go. Press tab, and now select your little lid. Press Shift S, selection to cursor. And now it's at pretty much the right place. And let's just rotate this R, Y. And let's see if we need 90 or minus 90. It's always a little guess. Let's do 90. All right, so that doesn't work. We have to do minus 90. And if 90 doesn't work, by the way, Blender has this nice thing where you can just backspace, right? So I'm doing backspace and just changing that to minus 90. Right, and then just move it upwards a little bit, press GZ. There we go, just so it's sitting on your can nicely, like that. And let's press G and X, and just move that out a little bit, just like that. All right, so in this tutorial, we made the lid for our can. And it was an entire tutorial for one little element, but we did more than we actually did for that can, for example, because we now did booleans, subdivisions, we did some bevels as well, we had some vector stuff as well, so we had a small object, but a lot to learn. And for next tutorial, we're going to be working more with curves. I had it planned for this lesson, but I think we're going to end it right here because we're 45 minutes in. So yeah, I hope it was doable. I hope it was easy to follow. You can always watch the recording back, of course, if something was going too fast. And yeah, let's just end it right there. I hope you enjoyed it. Are there any questions?
I was just gonna say thank you again, Nino, for doing this. This is the third class, but fourth official. Like it'll be the third class that's recorded, fourth class that we've been here live together. So I appreciate you doing this for a month now. It's the month anniversary of the Blender classes.
Hey, let's go. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
And
I have a question. I have a question for the for the inset. You used double I to change the mode, right? Does it also
yeah.
apply to extrude and stuff?
Extrude? I don't think so, actually. I have never tried that. Let me try.
Because it was pretty awesome.
No, so for extrude, it doesn't work. You will just extrude it as like one bunch. Um, so yeah, you will then have to
Yeah.
inset it first with double I, and then you can extrude it as separate objects. Sadly,
Yeah, you also have like the face. If you go to the face menu, you also have something for that, I think, right? But I'm not sure if it has a shortcut.
what do you mean?
Yeah, you have
Oh,
the extrude. Extrude along
along
normals and
normals.
the individual faces. Also
Yeah,
have that one.
that's when you, for example, select multiple faces that aren't in the same direction. I usually just set
Okay.
my pivot point, or no, I set my orientation to normal if I want to do that, and I then just press E, and it will pretty much do the same thing, even though it now looks quite odd. Um, so yeah, you can do it multiple ways. Or orientation will take care of it as well. Individual origins will change that too. It will make them scale in their own normal ways, so in their own normals. So
Nice.
yeah, there are multiple ways to do that, but the eye to inset is something I use a lot, and especially
Yeah.
with buildings and stuff, right? So if you have a cube and you want three windows, you can just add three sections and then just inset each of them separately with double I, and then just extrude and inset, extrude, however you want it. You can just do it like that, right? So it's a very nice trick. All right, any other questions? No questions at all. All right, Maple, what is the lid you're gonna make, man? What's the icon gonna be?
I was thinking just about this, and I have the perfect idea. You remember the puppet you have, the black puppet from the beginning?
The black puppet?
Yeah, in the beginning you only have that we just were really in the beginning of the puppets. Yeah, you only have like this is the sneak peek. Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
then you have this puppet, and then you only have a black puppet, for example, or a white puppet. I don't care what the
Ah,
color is.
yeah.
And this would be, for example, perfect for an SVG file like this. And then you have a puppet top of the can
Ah,
instead of
you
a
want the
bull.
puppet?
Yeah.
Nice. I can make that happen. I can make you a puppet icon. So, like I said before, it's just a little bit annoying that the best way to create those scalable vector images is with Adobe programs, which are paid. I can always try to find another program that does the same, but usually they're all paid products. I'm not sure if you know any product that does the same Bull Vader that is free.
I think for Photoshop itself, you have like a cheap version, or not cheap, but a free version. But yeah, it's very limited, and you have GIMP, I think, but I never used it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly.
yeah, and then the Photoshop,
So
only Photoshop is $20 a month, I think.
Yeah, you could try out the Photoshop trial maybe.
Sylvester is asking if you tried Inkscape.
I have actually tried it once, but it was harder to achieve the same results. But it is free. So Inkscape I think can do the same trick, but you need some manual tweaking, and it's a little bit harder to do. But I will share a YouTube tutorial with you all about how to do that with Inkscape. That was a good suggestion. Thank you, Sylvester. All right. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I think we can wrap this up. I will be posting, of course, a side quest, in the Discord, so you can all try out these new skills. Mr. Baked, I'm hoping to see some some of your cylinders as well next week. I don't want to pressure you. I just like to see work from the community as well. So if you're able to make some things with the lessons you've had already, please do share it with us. We can get feedback. We can help you out if you need it. So remember that. All right. Let's wrap this up. And next week, same time. Thank you all for joining this lesson and listening in. And I'll probably talk to you guys before next week. But let's wrap this up. See you guys later.
Thank you for the lesson.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks.